So if they have to study for an exam, all of a sudden their kitchen is clean. Or they have to work on their income taxes, then all of a sudden they mow the lawn. So tasks that have to be done, but they're not as time urgent. And we started looking at, well, what is it about these other tasks that all of a sudden become a priority? So one, they tend to be more manual or physical rather than intellectually demanding. So we said, how can we take some of the obligations and learn some lessons? So however you can make a task more manual or actionable, at least getting on task. So even if it's studying, can you go to the library? Can you get your textbook and pick it up? Can you at least go to the syllabus for the class and review your assignment? You're not working on it yet, but now the task or the assignment has gone from being an abstraction, an intellectual thought, yes, I know I need to do this, making it real. I'm looking at it, I'm reading it, I have the textbook in my hand. If it's writing, before you start writing, can you reread the last 2 paragraphs you wrote last time? Various steps of progressively, it's sort of like wading into the swimming pool. You step in a little bit and it's cold at first, but once you're in, you can start swimming. But beforehand, you're on the edge, not wanting to go in and get cold. Lowering the bar. A lot of times people get overwhelmed with everything that has to be done or the 10-page paper they have to write. We want to focus on the first page, the first line. So either the amount of time, can you work on this for at least 10 minutes? Maybe it's a task. Can you write at least 2 sentences, even if they're not in the final draft of the paper you submit? For some physical organization, it might be terrain-based. Can you at least clear off your desktop so it's clean? Set things to the side. You may have to put them away later, but can you at least focus on that or clearing off your bed? And I think this is very important, a realistic time frame with a start time and an end time. Because a lot of times people will binge work. I just have to sit down and write the paper. I have to spend 4 hours writing the paper. We don't do things we like for 4 hours long, much less writing a paper. Now, there may be a lot of work to be done on the paper, but if it can be broken down into a time frame, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, so that there's an end point, sort of like swimming in a swimming pool. If you can see the edge, you can marshal the resources to keep going. I read an account that in the US military special forces, part of the mental training as well as the physical training, they have to strap on like a 50, 60-pound pack, and they're told to go for a run, but they're not told how far they're going. And that's the mental training. How do you pace yourself if you don't know how long something's going to be? And that's how a lot of students face academics. I just have to go till I'm done. And that's how we can break things up a little more. And coming up with scripts. Like, what is the recipe for the task you need to employ? In terms of emotional management, probably the biggest thing is handling discomfort. Like I said, nobody's ever in the mood to study. It's hard to get started, but can you invest the discomfort for the first minute to get through from not doing to doing, sort of like wading into the swimming pool. We talk about using mindful recognition. Notice how you're feeling. There's some research to say stating what you feel, labeling your emotions, that helps reduce amygdala firing, the emotional center of the brain, just doing that. And also, if we think about speaking as action on the task, just saying, I'm really not in the mood to do homework, that can lighten the physical, visceral, negative emotion. Doesn't make it go away, but we're just trying to get over the step of getting started so that we can feel discomfort and still do it. Implementation intention strategies. This is a specific line of research, not originally targeting ADHD, but Katharina Gallrelou in Germany has been studying this in children with ADHD, and we've adapted it for use with adults. Pretty much what the paragraph here is saying, by coming up with a plan for how you're going to take a goal, say doing homework, and then if you sketch out, where will I do this and what will I do? In a brief if X then Y statement. The theory is it sets up the environment as a cue for self-regulation. So if the goal is to do the homework, the implementation intention step may be, if I sit at my desk, then I can work on math for at least 10 minutes. So presumably if you have that plan, when you get home, see your desk, a realistic time frame of 10 minutes, you'll sit down and get started. And at least in lab research, it has been shown to help students with ADHD have better follow-through than if it's not used. And so the best outcomes come when there is this overarching goal of keeping up with homework, but then a specific implementation intention plan. And this can be used to handle starting a task, handling distractions or interruptions. If I get interrupted, then I can sit back down at the desk and review the last answer I wrote down or the last sentence I read as a way for getting back on task, rather than I'm off task, there's nothing else I can do. Now, I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the negative thinking in ADHD. Going back to the slide before, what happens if the interpretation, that original thought, is distorted? It's incomplete. We're not talking about delusional. We all have these distorted thoughts every day. It's just incomplete. We make a first quick interpretation of a situation, and that can be very adaptive. Sometimes we have to think quick. But very often we have incomplete information. We add things in that aren't there. So this is just one picture of a host of distortions, but I want to go through some of the common thinking errors that we see in ADHD. One is magnification and minimization. Magnifying the negative and minimizing the positive. Or with getting on task, magnifying how uncomfortable, awful, and futile it will be, and minimizing our ability to do a little bit, get started, to handle some of the discomfort, and actually get into it enough that we can make some headway. Comparative thinking is a big one in ADHD. Basing your sense of self on how you think you compare with other people. Johnny doesn't have to work as hard to keep up with the reading as I do. I have to write multiple drafts, or it takes me twice as long for my writing assignments as this other person. Nobody else has to go see a doctor or needs a coach or other things that can make somebody feel different. Some of these supports, like having a doctor or a coach, might be adaptive, but still they might be viewed a certain negative way by the individual, which is something that needs to be accounted for. Jumping to conclusions is another one. This comes up a lot, the distortion of mind reading. I just know this is why the other person did this. I just know they're angry at me or disappointed. It may be a fact, but we're usually reading into the situation. And like overgeneralization, blowing things out of proportion. I didn't do well on this test. I'm not going to do well in the class. I'm going to fail out of school. And in the few seconds it took me to describe that thought, these things hit immediately. It's not like we're thinking in these complete sentences. It hits as an impulse and carries a lot of meaning and can shift our mood, make us stop doing things, gets in the way of a lot of things. And I should go back to the last one, magical thinking or a positive bias, an over-reliance on good luck. It'll all work out somehow. I'll get it done somehow. Positive thinking, in the early days of cognitive behavioral therapy, especially for depression, it was viewed as, well, isn't this the power of positive thinking? But say people who gamble are very positive thinkers, but it's not very adaptive. So there have been some findings that there may be a positive bias that we see in ADHD. The next few slides are just looking at some recent research showing that these cognitive distortions do play a role in ADHD, with the studies primarily with adults. The other thing is, it used to be thought that if there are negative thoughts in ADHD, it's only relevant when there's depression or anxiety, where we already have some good cognitive theories. But these studies are showing that no, ADHD by itself can lead to these negative thoughts. This is a recently published ADHD cognition scale by Laura Naus and colleagues. And it's a 7-item scale and is dominated by many of the distorted positive thoughts. I'll just do this one thing first, then I'll get back to it. I do better waiting till the last minute. I have plenty of time. I'll just do one more thing before I go, and I can still make it on time. I know I'm supposed to be doing something else, but I don't want to do this now. And I think these positive thoughts for individuals with ADHD are meant to be self-protective. These tasks, schoolwork, whatever else, have become difficult over time, so it's harder and harder to get started on them. And so, if I can just take a break, one more thing, it's a way to keep them at arm's length a little while longer. This is a study, our group, and we were really surprised by this finding that perfectionism was far and away the most common distortion in adults. But then when I thought about it later, and this goes beyond the data that we had, but I was thinking this might be what we called front-end perfectionism. I have to be in the mood to do something. Circumstances have to be just right. And there may be a grain of truth to that. I can't have too many distractions. I need enough time. I need to have enough energy. But this can be taken to extremes where nothing's ever going to be perfect. So it's sort of the getting ready to get ready phenomena. Once everything's in its place, then I can do it, but not now. So one of the things about cognitions in ADHD, there's a feature of the cognitive model for depression, for anxiety, called cognitive specificity. That the approach for each of the emotional disorders, if you will, there's a specific theme in the cognitions. So with depression, it's loss. With anxiety, it's threat. If not physical threat, like people have in panic disorder, I'm afraid I'm having a heart attack, I'm gonna die. There can be 21st century threat of people won't like me, or my work's not gonna be good enough. And with ADHD, there just wasn't that same emotional theme, and ADHD is not a mood or anxiety disorder. So one of the contentions I'm making is that the main cognitive issue in ADHD is impaired self-regulatory efficacy. And I'm going to have a few slides later to sketch out what that actually means. But efficacy itself is the belief in our ability to follow through on tasks. Albert Bandura spent a lifetime developing this. And the self-regulatory efficacy is sort of a very relatively minor facet that not too many people have looked at. But as I'll show in a couple slides, it seems to be right on the mark in terms of what I hear from folks with ADHD. And it seems to be self-distrust, self-mistrust. I know I can do it, but I don't trust that I can do it right now. So the self-distrust, those can be the automatic thoughts, the thoughts in the moment. What are your thoughts about doing the task? Like going back to the perfectionism, I'm not sure I can do it right now. Circumstances aren't right. So if I wait till they're right, then I can do it. And if we have enough variability over time, there's this more core sense of self-mistrust. I know I've done it in the past, but I can't draw confidence from my past experiences that I can do it when I have to do it. And that can lead to the ongoing procrastination avoidance. The main behavioral issue, for my money, engagement. Disengagement versus engagement. I know I want to do this. I know I have to do this. I'll be better off if and when I do this. but how can I get engaged and do it? And that's why a lot of times the struggles will be, boy, the student really spends a lot of time on this topic area to the detriment of these other three, because we're going to go to where we feel confident and where we have the successes. Or really good at athletics or reading or some other activity, video games. But there doesn't seem to be that allocation of time and effort elsewhere. Part of that is an executive functioning problem, but then magnified by the learning issue, or the learning issue, the learned behavior related to, I want to do what I enjoy and what is easier and that I'm good at. The natural human tendency we all have. For me, the main emotional issue is handling discomfort. It's hard to do things, and a lot of things affected by ADHD, homework, adult responsibilities, raising your hand when you already know the answer, making your bed. Why do I want to make my bed? I'm going to be messing it up later today. It doesn't seem logical, and there are logical arguments against it, but some of the have-tos in life. Then the main implementation issue, how do we turn plans, intentions into actions? Even if it's just, I want to get homework out of the way so I can earn my points or earn time for myself. Picture of Albert Bandura, and when I was researching this concept, I got a copy of one of his books through interlibrary loan, and when I looked at the front of it, it was actually this autograph from him was in that book. And it says, "May the efficacy force be with you," Albert Bandura. Self-regulatory efficacy. To plan and structure activities, to enlist needed resources, to regulate one's motivation through proximal challenges and self-incentives, and to manage the emotionally and cognitively disruptive effects of obstacles, setbacks, and stressors. How do you persist when you don't feel like doing it? This is pretty much, you could put in executive functions in this paragraph, and this would be ADHD. In many spheres of functioning, people know full well how to perform the needed behavior. Here, the relevant efficacy beliefs concern self-regulatory capabilities. Can people get themselves to stick with the behavior given the many dissuading conditions they will encounter? Those who distrust their capabilities to surmount unpleasant factors have little reason to put themselves through misery. Why do I want to bother studying if I know I'm going to get a lousy grade, everybody's going to be angry with me, I want to play Xbox, I'm good at that, I've got friends online. In familiar activities that must be performed regularly to achieve desired results, it is perceived self-regulatory efficacy rather than perceived efficacy for the activity per se that is most relevant. So just to put a finer point on all the different things that go into turning intentions into actions. Personal agency, that's the ability that we have, the belief in our ability to make changes in our life. We cannot affect the weather, but we can look at some things that we have the option of doing to improve our lives. Self-efficacy from agency is the belief in one's ability to control some specific events, more specific goals. So one, I believe that I can make changes in my life. I have a couple options right now. That example I have at the bottom. I believe education, more education will help me achieve my goals. I want to enroll in this specific class for a topic, a job that is something I want to try. Self-regulatory efficacy is the belief in one's ability to organize and carry out the actions of that project. The belief in the ability that I will be able to show up in class on time, take notes, understand it, and complete all the homework. That's what ADHD gets in the way of. And what's maddening about it is the person belongs in the class, they have the capacity to do it. But it's that, the disruption, the punctuation of ADHD in these reasonable endeavors. It's not like somebody's coming in saying, I really think I should be the CEO of Apple. It's unfair that they haven't chosen me. It's not that. No, these are very feasible options. And what people are looking for, from the youngest child with ADHD to a middle-aged older adult, are reasonable sense of cause and effect. If I study, if I show up for class, I just want reasonable confidence that I'll pass the class.